The Jets have one last chance to try and save the series, and they're throwing everything on the table with a bunch of new lines and new looks. Find out all of this on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support, especially during these very difficult playoffs, which haven't exactly gone Winnipeg's way. Of course, tonight is Game 5. It's going to be at home, and I expect a pretty wild and rowdy crowd. I think a lot of Jets fans are probably tense. I think all of us are, in some capacity, irritated by the results and sort of the tactical approach, but it is what it is, right? But it does seem like the Jets are about to make some big changes. We'll dive into all of that in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, just wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit that I have a competitive side, and I'm personally a big fan of Monopoly Go. It's the hit mobile twist on the classic Monopoly game that lets you join your friends and compete for big prizes and fun. Download Monopoly Go free on the App Store or Google Play. Now, like I said, the Jets are coming into Game 5 with the need to basically treat it like Game 7. Every game from here on out is Game 7, even Game 7. I mean, we all know this. That's sort of the nature of being in a situation where you're in an elimination series. And I think for the Jets, this has been one of the perhaps most surprising first rounds that they've gone through. It kind of seems like they've been dealing with shell shock ever since the start of the series when, it was 7-6, and Colorado only really lost because Georgiev let in a few really bad squeakers, right? Hellebuck wasn't exactly at his sharpest either, but he was probably a lot better than people realized because the Avs just created loads and loads of chances. And I think when you're looking at how Winnipeg has arranged, their tactical approach and their lines, it was always doomed to fail from the start. The top line just really wasn't getting it done. The second line has been a bit of a ghost. The bottom six has been getting caved in. The defense has been especially porous. I mean, you look at the blue line pairings and what they've tried to do, and for one thing, Stanley should have never dressed for this series. I respect him a lot. I think he's a great guy, and I think, he has his moments where he can do some really nice stuff, but this was always a mismatch for his skill set. He's a big physical player who's probably not as physical as you would expect him to be, and also doesn't really supplement that with like elite skating, right? When he's in the offensive zone, you actually get some pretty good stuff out of him. If he had been raised, like I said, to be more of an offensively minded blue liner, maybe we have a different conversation. But I think the reality is this has been a very one-sided series, and the Jets kind of handicapped themselves a little bit with some of the line choices and pairings that they really arranged. It's unfortunate, but it's the way it is. And now the Jets are in a 3-1 hole with not a lot of opportunities to really shake this. I think if you're the Jets, this is definitely desperation time. You are prepared to do whatever it takes to try and squeak out a win. Like, even if the Jets don't play well but still come away with a victory, I think that would at least go a long way to trying to rebuild their morale. Obviously, Game 6 is going to be on the road, and that is a very daunting prospect. But if you can at least get that chance, Winnipeg might feel a little bit better about their odds in the series. I think that first win on the, at home ice, I think really gave them a much larger cushion than we realized, because now they're in a situation where if they can win 2 straight, it comes back to Winnipeg, and that is a huge, huge deal. Again, it's going to take a lot for that to really happen, and I'm going to put it out there that, all the changes that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes might be too little too late. It could be a situation where, the Jets have already put themselves in a deep enough hole to where it doesn't matter. It's extremely rare that teams that are down, 3-1 in a series ever come back. I mean, that is the reality, but, if there was ever a time for this team to rally and show us that they are made of something special and that they are serious about, being a playoff contender, this is it. Forget all the regular season success, forget everything that's happened in the last 4 games, make the adjustments, get aggressive, and focus on the present. And maybe, just maybe, you give yourself a chance to come back in the series. We've seen this team play much better hockey than this. We know what they're capable of. We've seen it several times. And again, it might not matter in the grand scheme of things, but I think as a fan, we all just deserve to watch a team that's good. And I think for the players who worked really hard to get to this point, if you're talking about adjustments and what the Jets need to do, come out swinging, right? This is a series where you had moments where you looked like a really good team, but it got drowned out by the fact that the Avs were literally outproducing the Jets in chances, like 5-1 at any given time. So for Winnipeg, this is a huge test. This is, of course, naturally every game is the most important game of the series, but this really is the most important game of the series. We're either going to see this team flame out in really depressing fashion, or we're going to see them perhaps spark something to take into future games. And again, like I said, in the context of this series, it probably won't change the overall outcome. But you know what? You can at least feel a little bit better that the effort and the coaching staff gave the team the best chance possible. And I think that's always what I've asked for. Look, I think Colorado has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that it probably is the best team in the league right now. I think what they're doing to the Jets is partially helped by the Jets being a little bit silly, but also the Avs are just a buzzsaw. Colorado changed its neutral zone approach. It changed how it pressured Winnipeg's puck carriers, and it has shown that the speed and skill that they didn't always use to their max level during the regular season is still very much there, and they have absolutely ripped through the Jets. It's a little sad for us. I'm not really shocked in some ways. I was always kind of thinking in the back of my mind that this could happen, that maybe the Avs are going to turn it around in the postseason, because this team is still built for the playoffs. And, regardless of what they did at the end of the season, still a really dangerous team. And if Georgiev was even remotely closer to average, that would be a problem. I think it did get overlooked that he led the league in wins and had an .897 save percentage, right? So that was probably a little scarier than any of us wanted to admit. The Colorado offense is a buzzsaw. They've done it both at even strength and on the power play. It's just a huge mess. And with the Jets just having too many weak links and a PK that can't kill anything, it's an uphill battle. But like I said, start off with game 5, see how it goes, right? Worst case scenario, you get eliminated. It is what it is. And we head into what should be a very, very interesting offseason. I'll be honest, I think there's going to be a lot of change again. I don't know if it's going to be change that I'm happy about, but it is going to be a very chaotic offseason where the Jets are probably going to bid farewell to at least one or two of our bigger names. So there's a lot to unpack there, but that's more for offseason discussion. And the Jets, guess what? They ain't in the offseason yet. They've still got one big chance to try and come back and force at least a game 6. Now, to that end, the Jets have made some really big lineup adjustments. We're going to talk about what, the lines that have just come out from Ken Wiebe and a number of other reporters who are currently in Winnipeg right now, watching practice and stuff. And look, they did finally do some of the stuff that we've been begging them to do. Is it too little, too late? It could be, but we'll at least walk through and see what the Jets have done. But of course, before we dive into all of that, I did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Monopoly Go. I admit that I definitely have a competitive side, and obviously we've got to talk here and pause and kind of talk about Monopoly Go. I know I mentioned it earlier in the episode, and you might be asking, why are we coming back to it? But I didn't really get to tell you why it's a really fun and great spin on a classic game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. You can get all of these great things, whether it's stickers that you can trade with friends to complete your sticker albums for big prizes. You can get cool new little playing pieces to use. And, everyone always has their favorite playing piece. I always wanted the dog. Who doesn't love dogs, right? And of course, if you really want to kind of troll your friends, you can get hilarious emojis to taunt your friends when you smash their buildings or steal from their vaults. Monopoly Go always feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments, challenges, and content. They include a ton of their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers and rent frenzy. So If you're looking to spice up the old formula, there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just we're chatting about the Jets ahead of Game 5. Things have changed a bit. Winnipeg is making some adjustments. Not all of them may end up meaning enough in this grand scheme of the series, but you know what? You can only take what you are given, and at this point, I'll take anything, right? Game 5 is basically Game 7 for the Jets, and if that's, the last game that Winnipeg plays this season, at least I want to see them go out swinging. I know that the Avs have been the superior team. I know that they are maybe even the best team in the league right now. Let's just hope that we finally see some really good answers to a team that has, quite frankly, embarrassed the Jets for the last. Before we dive into some of the new lines and stuff, just wanted to shout out something really cool that might be fun for all of you NFL fans. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who our local experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Now, like I said, the Jets have some serious business to take care of, down 3-1. And guess what? Winnipeg has made some pretty big changes to the lineup. And like I said, it may not mean anything in the grand scheme of things, right? It may be too little too late. But what I've always maintained about the Jets is that when they play, all I care about is that they were put in the best position to succeed. I don't care if they lose. Obviously, it'd be great if they won, but if they're just going down swinging and they're giving it their best, for me, there's never been an effort question with this team. I think the setup has kind of been what's been lacking, right? The tactical approach, the in-game adjustments, the predetermined lines. I think that's where, there was some stubbornness and resistance to, going with a lineup that's a little more aggressive, a little more fun. And honestly, it's a shame because I think if the Jets had gone with this new lineup, they might have actually had a better chance of at least evening the series up, if nothing else. But so far we've got Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde together, Connor, Monahan, and Perfetti, Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton, Iafallo, Gustafsson, and Toffoli. On defense, Morrissey, DeMello, Sandberg, Pionk, and then Schmidt and Miller. The only guy that I would say maybe needs to be swapped is Toffoli and Appleton. Obviously, Pionk's never getting benched, so you can just kind of kiss that hope goodbye. I think Neil could probably do with some time off, but at this point, it is what it is. If there's only one weak link on the team, whatever. I love Neil anyways, and it's just a shame that things have been really rough for him, but if he can somehow find some stability with Sandberg, that would be ideal. What I expect from this lineup is that Winnipeg is going to be a little more defensively resolute. I think the biggest change, though, is whether or not this lineup is going to be allowed to be more aggressive in the neutral zone. Are they going to deny zone entries at their own blue line? Will they be able to stand up the Av skaters before they enter? That's where Winnipeg has really made its bread and butter against this team, is not letting the Avs have that time and space. You take that away and Colorado starts to look a little more pedestrian. They'll still have individual shifts where that top six absolutely tears you apart. But at the same time, right, the depth lines were supposed to be where the Jets won the battle. And there's a good chance that given this lineup, Winnipeg might actually look a lot stronger at managing some of those matchups. I think Niederreiter, Lowry, and Appleton probably could have done with having Toffoli at their hip. But then again, Toffoli really hasn't done enough in my mind to actually earn a promotion. So from Bones' perspective, I get it. You have a 62-17, 22 line that's been very good for much of the season. They haven't been good this series, if we're being honest. At times, Lowry and Appleton have stood up and had individual performances that were a little more noteworthy, but as a line collectively, I think it's been hard for them. But it's kind of hard to really be upset about that particular trio when everyone across the board has kind of sucked. And I think, the lack of foot speed on the back end has made their job exponentially harder. So in that respect, I get it. And I'm not going to be too harsh on them. I think they're all fighting as hard as they can, but it is just a tough matchup, a tough assignment. And I'm hoping that this trio for each of the top six lines actually gets something going. I said that very strangely. I should have just said the first and the second lines. I hope these new combos can really reignite this team. I think Winnipeg has kind of been in a state where both the first and second lines have really been trying to push, and things haven't really gotten going. But with Connor Monahan and Perfetti really balances out that second line and sort of Connor's deficiencies quite nicely. Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde was one of the most dominant lines we've ever had. And if you have those two guys essentially going against Colorado's best, whether it's Nichushkin, McKinnon, Rantanen, or Parise, Parise is apparently very good, having a career resurgence in the playoffs, of course, because why wouldn't he against the Jets? And then, of course, Lehkonen. If you can start to slow those guys and contain them, this becomes a much more winnable game. And it also may give you some keys to success to slowing down the Avs in Game 6. Now, again, Game 6 only happens if the Jets take care of business tonight. And that is a much bigger task than I think any of us would care to admit. But you know what? You got to start with steps, baby steps at this point. I'm not asking for the Jets to win every single game. I'm not asking them to be unbeatable or something. If they lose with this lineup, it just is what it is. I honestly think that if Colorado beats Winnipeg here, there's a really good chance that they go on to the Cup Finals. Every time the Jets lose to somebody in the postseason, that team has apparently gone on to the Cup Finals over the past few years. It's really annoying. Calgary was one of those exceptions, but Montreal did. Who else? Gosh, the Knights did, and it's just frustrating. Colorado has, been a big pain the past few years. So it'd just be nice if the Jets can get some measure of revenge. It'd be great if Winnipeg can also show some fighting spirit tonight. I think, effort-wise, a lot of the players have really pushed very hard. They've all fought, but they just haven't been able to get much going. This is a chance for them to really rewrite that narrative and kind of send off Bones with a fun farewell, because I do think this is probably Rick's last season as head coach of the Jets. I think he's probably more in line to retire than anything. And with, such a storied career that just hasn't really led to a championship, it'd be nice if the Jets could send him off with a cup. If he wins a cup, heck, if he wants to stay, I don't care. A cup would basically set me for the next 10 years as a Jets fan. Obviously, you'd like to see them sustain it, but I think, let's be real, right? Championship titles are so hard to come by, especially in this sport. And I think for Winnipeg, it would just hit very different than for a lot of other cities. Tampa's been spoiled. Who else? LA has been spoiled. Chicago's been spoiled. The Jets legitimately need this more than a lot of other teams. Winnipeg itself needs this, and I think it starts here in Game 5 with a big win. Now, assuming the Jets get through Game 5 and they actually reflect good tactical changes, what do you do for Game 6? Game 6 is going to be a new environment. Not really a new team necessarily, but maybe the Avs are going to have a little bit of an extra step playing in that high altitude variation. Obviously, the Jets didn't have that trouble in the regular season, but in the playoffs, with all the lack of foot speed and everything, every single advantage that could be going Colorado's way certainly set Apologies for that disruption. It appears that we lost a bit of connection, but was just saying that, assuming the Jets even get to a Game 6, right, that is a huge challenge, a bit of a mountain for the Jets to climb. Winnipeg's going to be at a disadvantage. The crowd's going to be loud. So do the Jets even have a chance? What can we expect from a Game 6? We'll get to that in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball is, of course, in full swing as well, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Maybe you're feeling a little bit bold and you want to bet on the Jets' comeback in this playoff series. However unlikely it is, it's no problem. Even if the Jets lose, guess what? New customers can get $150 in bonus bets back guaranteed. That's $150 to have some more fun, win or lose. Maybe you're also interested in betting on Jays baseball or perhaps a little bit of F1 action. No matter what sport you're into, FanDuel is actually one of the best places to really get in on all of the action. They've got tons of great sports covered. They've got lots of wonderful different categories you can bet on. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are just talking about, say, the Jets surviving Game 5, they go to Game 6, what's going to happen? Look, I'll be blunt, right? Getting to Game 6 is going to be a challenge in and of itself, perhaps even impossible for this Jets team, but I'm still holding a modicum of faith, right? If Winnipeg can force at least a Game 6, that will be fascinating because the last few road games have been an unmitigated disaster. But say that this new look lineup is the answer. Say the tactical adjustments on aggression in the neutral zone or at Winnipeg's blue line change how the Jets approach things. Well, for one thing, Winnipeg is going to have to figure out how to limit the sheer volume of chances the Avs have created, especially off of breakouts, right? The Jets have conceded loads of rush chances, and there's been a couple of things that I've noticed that Colorado really does well. It was less apparent in Game 1 because the Jets were able to outscore some of their problems, but in Games 2, 3, and 4, not as much of the same story. One thing that's definitely been noticeable is that when the Avs get a turnover in their own zone, they immediately rush 3 guys on a good breakout that has basically swept through the Jets. Even as they try to intercept in the neutral zone, we've seen Lowry and Toffoli and other guys miss checks in open ice where, in the last game, Makar basically walked through Winnipeg's entire defensive structure and scored. That's really not something that you can let happen again. I think for the Jets, that is a huge frustration. I think that's been a pretty consistent problem this series. And then once the Avs actually have zone possession, they are very good at picking you apart down low. The other thing that the Jets have really struggled to do is that when it comes to point shots getting through, they've let guys get free tips on Hellebuck and past him. I mean, there's been some ugly, ugly goals. I think back to the Nichushkin tip that was a wide open shot for Makar to basically just take a beautiful long distance wrister. And he's done that multiple times, whether he's had screens or tips and deflections. It hasn't really mattered. The puck has found its way through. And look, I know that Kale is Kale, right? Makar is a fantastic blue liner, a great attacking presence. It's understandable that the Jets would have trouble containing him. But for Winnipeg, there's just other fundamental stuff that you can't let happen. You can't let a completely uncontested Nichushkin sit in front of Helly with a free stick. I mean, you just can't. There's no way that is an acceptable outcome, especially on a penalty kill where you're already struggling with other shooting angles and stuff. And maybe you can't stop every single weapon on this power play, but you can at least slow them down or make it as difficult as possible to score. Eventually, they may still cash in, and that is just a reality. But if you can at least make it a little bit more competitive and give this Avs team a harder lane to the net, that's going to make your life a lot better. Winnipeg hasn't done enough of that. They haven't been frustrating enough to play against, and I think that has been a really tough thing for the Jets to sort of navigate around. But for Winnipeg, assuming that they survive Game 5, Game 6 is going to have to be a really up-tempo, aggressive performance. They need to do it both in Game 5 and Game 6. Game 7, obviously, there are probably going to be some adjustments. I'm hoping that the Jets don't really lose the fire through these next 3 games. Assuming that they get through either of these, in the next couple of days, then Game 7 sits at the end, and that's going to be on home ice with a chance to pull off one of the most miraculous series comebacks, not only in Jets history, but also in NHL history. I don't know that there's ever been a team that's been as dominant in this playoff run as the Avs are doing to the Jets right now. This is like an NHL team full of superstars taking on an ECHL team. That's kind of been the equivalent. So We know that Winnipeg can play a lot better than it has. We know that the Jets defense can be a lot better. Intriguingly, Garrett Hole actually found that, offensively speaking, the Jets are creating about the same number of chances as they did in the regular season. So in that respect, they're still doing okay, but defensively, that has been a train wreck, an absolute nightmare. And I'm really hoping that starting tonight, they begin to clean that up. And that's where I think Perfetti actually adds a lot of help. He's a very smart player who can jump those passing routes. He's got very good interior positioning. He's not the biggest kid, but he's sizable enough to where he knows how to use his body and frame to try and force turnovers. And, maybe some other players haven't been able to do that as much. But for the Jets, I think this is a critical moment. I think that this is a time for the Jets to really come through and pull off a big comeback. And if they can do this, if they're able to pull this off, this would be a pretty miraculous result. And I think, the players should feel really proud if they can do it. A lot left to play for, though. I can't say that it's going to happen, and it may not. The Jets may still end up losing tonight or, the next game. And it is what it is, right? But all I've ever wanted is for them to give us their very best. And if it's not enough, it's just not enough. I think that's all I've ever asked for. It's what I've hoped for. Maybe the Jets can really surprise us with a couple more interesting results, games that give us some hope that maybe Game 7 is a thing. I'm not going to look that far yet. I can barely even look at Game 6 because we still have a critical Game 5 that the Jets have a huge battle to get through. But with this new lineup, with renewed energy and confidence, and with home ice back in reach and in sight, maybe the Jets can do the impossible. That home ice advantage that the Jets secured in the regular season may finally mean something if they can at least get through the next two games. But for that, the Jets have a lot of work to do. I don't want to add any more pressure to their plate. I'm sure it is already full enough. Let me know what you think is going to happen in the comments below. I'm not going to do predictions because I've been wrong about every single one. So let me know what you think is going to happen in Game 5 in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, hopefully talking about a Game 5 win. But for tonight's episode, like I said, that's all the time that we have. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.